Tonight on Real News from the Blaze, a special report, Showdown, Wisconsin. As voters go to the polls to select a Democratic challenger for the recall election of Governor Scott Walker, we'll take a look at the important reforms he's put in place that have turned the state's economy around. It could be a model for the country, but instead, it's made Walker a target for special interests and big labor. The story the mainstream media isn't telling you and the ramifications it has for the nation. That's coming up on Real News in just 60 minutes.
This is not going to be about politics. This is about principles. We're going to take it upon ourselves to be part of the solution.
We are going to restore history, restore our honor, restore his idea that character is what matters.
Let us not lose this battle because we sat down.
This is the Glenn Beck Program.
Well, hello, America, and welcome to GBTV. This is the network that you are building, and I thank you for that. Tonight, I want to talk to you about three things, and I want you to think about these, really think about them, because I found them shocking yesterday. One, the Nazi and communist parties are gaining power. That's incredible. Two, Islamists are gaining power. And three, the caliphate is coming. All three of these things are absolutely insane. They're insane. Communism has been discredited. The Soviet Union fell. The Nazis and the caliphate, ask Bill Kristol. Last night, if you missed last night's show, I want you to go back and watch it on demand. I got home last night, and my wife is gone, so I'm playing Mr. Mom, and I was making the kids some dinner. Actually, I was just reheating pizza. But I'm watching last night the show, mainly with the sound off because I didn't want to scare the kids. And I realized we just zoomed past the whole, hey, Nazis have been elected in Greece part of the show. I told you the news. I told you that there, but we never sat there and just went, wait a minute, let's think about this. Nazis, the ones who killed 10 million people, 6 million Jews, those guys, they're back and they're gaining power and popularity. Yep. Same colors. Same platform, and people are actually voting for them. It only took 70 years to completely forget that Nazi Germany invaded and slaughtered almost 10% of the entire Greek population. That's a little over 500,000 people. Let me give you some a concept of how massive that is. You remember 9/11. How many people did they kill on 9/11? 3,000. This is akin to having 30 million people killed on 9/11. And then just a few decades later, Americans start voting Al-Qaeda members in with the same platform. And they're like, yeah, they're going to help us. That's what's happened in Greece with the neo-Nazis. 7% of the popular vote went to the nationalist neo-Nazi Golden Dawn Party. 7. They entered parliament for the first time. They now have 21 seats. Now, I wish the media would absolutely go nuts on this because it's a nutty idea. But fact is, look, truth has got to be stranger than fiction because fiction has got to make sense or nobody would buy it. Here we are in 2012 watching the Nazis and the communists gain power all over the world, and the media is in denial. Tonight, I just want you to get a handle on that Nazis and the communists have 20% of Greece. The seats, an office. These guys have an office. Tonight we're going to look at a couple things. We're going to look at who they really are and what it took to get elected, because this is important. And two, what has happened to anyone who tries to ring the warning bell? What has this administration done to anybody who says, hey, extremes of the past are going to rise up? The Nazis in Greece are the Golden Party, the Golden Dawn Party. They call themselves a people's nationalist movement. Not surprisingly, their charter puts the leader in total charge of the party. Total control of the party. Really. What a surprise there. Now, among the ideas for policies, all immigrants are illegal. All immigrants are illegal. Then you have, the next policy is, put them all in work camps. Instead of deporting or jailing more than 1 million people, let's put them in work camps. The immediate closure of all foreign non-governmental organizations and creation of doctors with borders that would provide medical services just for the Greeks. Withdraw from the EU and seal the borders of Greece. One of their anti-immigration slogans is, quote, so we can rid the land of filth, end quote. Now, I don't know about your standards, but that's not one I run to. That's not a slogan that I'm like, I got to put that on my bumper sticker. I got to put that in the back of my car. I got to have a sign in my yard that says that. That seems like it's a pretty radical platform. It does. It reads like this. This is Mein Kampf. Never read it? Oh, you should. It's all there. The Germans denied it, but they all read it. In Mein Kampf, it says, quote, the final consequences is not merely that the people lose all their freedom under domination of the Jews, but in the end, these parasites themselves disappear. The Golden Dawn. Now, people will marginalize this, but please, dear God, don't. Please, please don't. The Golden Dawn has been on a rapid incline in the polls. In 2009, they received less than 0.5% of the vote. 2009. In 2010, a year later, they received 5.3%, and this time it's 7%. That's faster than the global warming thing we should worry about. Oh, it's just Greece, and it's only 7%, big deal. Really? It's not just Greece, and it's not just 7%. It's also 5.2% now in London. Why? 2% nationally. It's the British national movement. Also, the Egyptian Nazi Party was established last year. I don't know if you know this, but there are also Nazi parties now in Belgium, Brazil, Bosnia, Chile, Croatia, Estonia, France, Germany, what a surprise, Israel, that is a surprise, Mongolia, Russia, Serbia, and Sweden. Oh, the United States. But you know that if you watch the news. You saw the National Socialists in Florida. They were threatening to patrol the streets. We've seen Nazis before, marching on streets and cities throughout our own country, and we get it. But we always dismiss them because they're crazy. But don't dismiss crazy people. This is different. These guys are now organizing, and they are gaining power. No one in America no one who's a Nazi is even elected to a school board or dog catcher. We all say to each other, they're Nazis. And we didn't have 10% of our population wiped out, did we? But Greece did. 10% of their grandparents were wiped out by this party in that country. And they vote them into office? In Europe, they're electing them to parliament. Mark my words, America, what is happening in Europe will embolden the fringes in this country. There is a movement. One of them is to reassemble or assemble the Fourth Reich. It is mind-boggling to see it rising in the very nations where people were being rounded up and killed by the Nazis 70 years ago. In Germany, you're taught about it. It's mandatory. because they don't want another 10 million people dead again. But it is happening in Germany. It's happening, what I told you a year and a half ago, maybe. The exact same hatreds are rising again. The communists and the Nazis, and they are gaining power. Now, how could that possibly happen? Well, the consensus among the experts in Greece is that life has gotten increasingly difficult. The mood overall has definitely gotten much, much worse. Foreigners make a good scapegoat. People just lose trust in the establishment. Politicians are pushed to the fringe. Because, see, what happens is the people who are in office aren't listening to the people anymore. And so they just look to these politicians who are out there like the Nazis because they offer an alternative to the current political system. Think of that one, please. We told you this would happen. That's why I told you this last night. We have to provide an alternative. That's why it's imperative that you never sell out to the Republican Party. You never betray the values. You cannot become part of the system, a part of the problem. They don't have small government tea parties in Europe, but that's the answer, small government. When people get desperate, they will follow anyone who claims to have the answer. It is the one and only thing that Jesus had in common with Adolf Hitler. Only one thing. Adolf could look into people's eyes and convince them that he had an answer. Jesus did have an answer. But they could both look into somebody's eyes who was desperate and say, "Follow me, and you will never go hungry." Hitler was evil. Jesus was good. But that is exactly... Abraham Lincoln was good. Hitler was evil. But people would follow them. But it was the same kind of promise. I can help you solve this problem. I watched The Lion King last night with the kids, Hannah and Rafe, and I sat on the couch, and Rafe's been wanting to watch The Lion King for a while, so we sat down on the couch and we watched The Lion King together. And I was struck again by the scene where Scar is preparing his army. The imagery is pretty obvious. The hyenas are doing the goose step, etc., etc. But I want you to see real quick here what he says that gets them to build this army and all come together. Listen to this.
Great idea! Who needs a king? No king, no king, la 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 la.
Idiots, there will be a king.
Hey, but you said
I will be king. Stick with me, and you'll never go hungry again.
Got it. Idiots. I mean, I watched that last night and I thought to myself, you idiots. There'll never be a king. There will be a king. That's what he needs to say to the Occupy Wall Street people. But what is he saying? What is this George Soros character saying? You'll never go hungry again. That's the thing that communists and Nazis will offer you. You'll never go hungry again. But there's a caveat. Let me start it again. Listen carefully and listen to what's just past it. Watch.
Of course, quid pro quo, you're expected to take certain duties on board.
Oh, they'll feed you. They'll feed you. The Nazis will feed you. The communists will feed you. Big government will feed you. But you will be expected. There's a price to pay. What kills me is we as people never remember the horrific price that people had to pay. Think of the price. 10% of the population of Greece paid the ultimate price with their lives. And now their children and grandchildren are jumping on board. There's a price for the people to pay. And it kills me that people always forget that. But there's another price that has to be paid. The leaders of these groups don't get it either. They don't remember the price that people in their position always have to pay. Only a few, like Kim Jong-il, actually make it to the end of their lives. You can count them on one hand. The rest of them end up like Scar at the end of The Lion King, right? Scar dies a brutal death. Always ends the same way. Scar, Hitler, and even Disney gets it. But that's how this is possible. It's the same every time. You come when things are in chaos. It's bottom up, top down, inside out. And when things get tough, they take advantage of people when they are weak and they are hungry, and they say, I will fix this problem for you. You'll never go hungry again. They move in when you're weak. And Europe is extraordinarily weak and only getting weaker. How about us? In Europe, they're electing further and further left and further right. And they just keep spending and printing money. When you stop and think about it, the Nazis and the communists gaining power and having actual seats in parliaments, that sounds certifiably crazy, and it is. But remember, I was called crazy, and I'm sure you were, for just pointing out the warning signs and sounding the alarm and telling people, wake up. The old hatreds of the past that we saw in the 1930s are coming back. Just for mentioning the word Nazi got me all kinds of heat. Watch.
Rabbi, what are you looking for here? What would be the sanction of Beck and Ailes that you guys would like to see happen?
I think it'd be wonderful if he would stop talking. Then how do you talk to each other? Not how do you silence and demonize each other. And I think that that's frankly the same conversation that I hope that someone has with Glenn Beck.
Glenn Beck said, political discourse needs to be in the context of history. So what gives him the license to make a sentence like this in promotion of his new book, while at the very same time using words flippantly, like Holocaust and Nazi and collaborator, which denigrates the memory of 11 million people who were murdered by the Nazis and trivializes the systematic annihilation of 6 million Jews? That's unacceptable.
Glenn Beck thinks playing the Nazi card is going too far. Glenn Beck! This is a guy who uses more swastika props and video of the Nuremberg rallies than the History Channel.
I'm just sitting here looking at the canaries as I'm doing this monologue. Canaries in the coal mine. Philadelphia Inquirer came after me, too. Quote, when everything is compared to Nazism, the true atrocities of the Holocaust are diminished. Given the breadth and intensity of the 24/7 media monster, there's an increasing legitimate danger that frequent Nazi references could signify or could significantly cheapen the emotional and historic impact of the tragedy, especially as time continues to pass and more Americans grow up immersed in a world of blogs and viral views. You know, I wonder, do you think they had anybody on television in Greece that said these parties that are doing what they are, grabbing more and more power, giving more and more stuff away, printing money, getting into a global government, doing those things would betray the people and could bring Nazis back to power? No, I doubt it. Because they have a state-run media. I doubt the warnings came there. Many of the attacks came from those in the Jewish community who had been influenced by George Soros, like the Jewish Funds for Justice. They are people who launched a petition to get me off of the air. If I may quote, we are disturbed by his increasing focus on attacking Jews and find it hard to believe that it was only a coincidence that 8 of the 9 individuals on his list alleging shadowy alliance to control Americans through their propaganda were Jewish. I don't remember a list. I'm pretty sure that wasn't my list, but thanks for the smear. And my attack on Jews? It's a distraction and a way to silence the truth, but the truth will never be silenced for long. People may come and go, I may come and go, but I have to tell you something. the truth remains the truth, and eventually it all comes out in the end. Now, maybe it was people who were misguided and they were just trying to do the right thing, but it doesn't matter. The truth, like it or not, is this, that Jews and people of faith are going to face those same foes that we faced in the 1930s and 40s. And they are going to come under attack because the Nazis and the communists are gaining power. Let me say that again. The Nazis and the communists are gaining power. We told you it was coming. I just don't think we took enough time last night just to reflect on that phrase and say, wow, it's here. Media's shrugging it off, most likely, as a small percentage. Big mistake. Because there's a second part to this. The Islamists are gaining power. Something we also told you. And it's important because the caliphate is coming. The Obama administration says the Muslim Brotherhood is mostly secular. The Muslim Brotherhood is mostly secular. And he says also that they're a legitimate political organization. They even invited the Muslim Brotherhood to the White House. Tried to find a picture, can't find a picture. It's amazing. The guy whose party is running the president in Egypt, that you're going to meet here in a second, this guy, his minions, come over to the White House from the other side of the globe and they don't take a single picture. Isn't that weird? Of course, we had a hard time finding pictures of the Dalai Lama. There's no pictures with the president with the Dalai Lama, you know, because they had to get him out by the trash cans. But at least there's that. Just a couple of weeks ago, Muslim Brotherhood in the White House. John Kerry went over to Egypt to meet with the Brotherhood just last week. I said they were a radical organization that wants to destroy Israel and establish a global caliphate. Well, let's put a final nail in that coffin. Let's just settle this dispute once and for all. And again, I'm not going to make the argument. I'm just going to use their own words. I'm going to show you something that happened at a political rally for the guy from the Muslim Brotherhood that is running for president of Egypt. He had a guy speak right before, or I think it was before him, a popular Egyptian imam. He's also a TV preacher, and he spoke to the supporters of the candidate from president from the Muslim Brotherhood who was standing on stage and nodding in agreement. Remember, this is a largely secular group that means no harm to Israel, our biggest ally in the Middle East. You see if that still works for you and the president. Watch this.
حلم الخلافة الإسلامية حلم أرض الخلافة يتحقق بإذن الله على يد الدكتور محمد مرسي ومن معه من إخوانه وجماعته وحزبه. رأينا الحلم الكبير الذي نحلم به جميعا. الولايات المتحدة العربية، الولايات المتحدة العربية ستعود تكون عاصمة الخلافة، ستكون عاصمة الولايات المتحدة العربية هي القدس إن شاء الله. تكون عاصمتنا ليست القاهرة ولا مكة ولا المدينة، وإنما القدس إن شاء الله. وسيكون هتافنا على القدس رايحين شهداء بالملايين، 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 على القدس. نوري ولن نواري ولن نداهن. نعم، هدفنا القدس. سنصلي في القدس أو ننال الشهادة على أعتاب القدس. الله على القدس رايحين شهداء بالملايين.
Do you think that's important at all for anybody to even show that on national television? Did you notice the fist? A global caliphate is coming. And they want to headquarter it in Jerusalem. So let me get this straight. The left wants to silence anyone who warns Jews that old hatreds are rising again, except at the same time they're dumping Miracle Grow and all the seeds of anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic hatred in the region and in Europe and here. They dismiss anyone who says the seeds could and now have sprout Nazis or communists. Both groups kill Jews by the millions. Then when somebody says the Muslim Brotherhood is not secular, look at the name, they dismiss them. And they follow Alinsky's advice. Same advice, in fact, the advice that was given to Saul Alinsky by Al Capone's killers, his hitmen, and used by Joseph Stalin. You isolate and marginalize. And if that doesn't work, Joseph Stalin decided, yeah, then you kill. It worked for Capone and Lenin and Mao and Stalin and Che and Pol Pot and Mussolini and Hitler, but I think you get the point. At the same time, the administration is marginalizing and isolating. No one notices that this administration and this president is appointing members of the Muslim Brotherhood into his administration. Arif Ali Khan, former Department of Homeland Security Assistant Secretary for Policy Development, Muslim Brotherhood. Mohammed El-Bari, Homeland Security Advisory Committee member, Muslim Brotherhood. Rashad Hassan, he's a State Department Special Envoy to the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, Muslim Brotherhood. Ibu Patel, Obama Administration Advisory Council on Faith-Based Neighborhood Partnerships, all part of a group that wants to establish a caliphate in Jerusalem called the Muslim Brotherhood. America, America, America. Ponder where we are. Which is more dangerous for the Jews and for all of humanity? Which one is going to lead to peace and prosperity? Going down a path that the world has gone down time and again and hoping for change? When that change is never identified, it never ends well. Here's what I recommend. You instead of hoping for change, you pray for the protection of divine providence and then get off your knees and get ready. The Nazi and communist parties are gaining power elsewhere in the world, and it will come here. The Islamists are gaining power, and they are already here. And the global caliphate is coming.
Do you find this recall to essentially be a political hit on you?
Sure, there's no doubt about it. I mean, this is all about punishing me, taking me out to send a clear message that if you dare to take on the entrenched special interest, they'll come and get you.
And the reason why the national unions are playing in Wisconsin is to send a message: don't take us on.
These reforms reduced the political influence of public employee unions. That reduction in influence is, I think, what has caused much of the sort of the chaos.
If we fail to win this election, if we fail to win this battle, this will set aside any sort of courageous act in American politics, at least a decade, if not a generation.
It's a great documentary, and it airs right after this program tonight. There are ways to store food for emergencies. You can buy big buckets of wheat and barley and refried beans and rice, and then in a couple of years throw it all away because, you know, the boll weevils are now infesting it. Or you could try to rotate it every month. That's what my wife and I tried to do. You know, once in a while you cook up a yummy barley and refried bean casserole or something. Or you go to foodinsurance.com and order delicious varieties of pre-prepared meals that are all freeze-dried, something that your family can actually eat, will want and will eat, that will last up to 25 years. Guess which option I chose? Food insurance, 866-9-GOT-FOOD. Call them now, 866-9-GOT-FOOD, or go to foodinsurance.com.
Have you considered silver as part of your portfolio strategy? Silver is the most affordable precious metal, and it has outperformed gold over the last 10 years. maybe it's time you consider silver. Silver can help diversify and balance your portfolio with a tangible asset that can move independently from other financial assets. And silver enjoys the benefit of both investment and industrial demand. It's never too late to diversify your portfolio with precious metals. Let Goldline, a precious metals leader, help you get started. Call Goldline and get your free investor kit. Be sure to ask about our price guarantee program. Use your credit card for safety and convenience and enjoy free shipping. Call Goldline now and buy silver with confidence. Get started today with Goldline.
The TRS Files, True Tax Resolution Stories.
Hi, I'm Stuart B. I'm in the insurance industry and I'm from Southern California. I faced a potential liability of $106,000. Tax resolution services settled for $9,200.
If you owe the IRS over $20,000 or more in back taxes, have unfiled returns, or are under audit, call Tax Resolution Services now, 888-7804-TAX, or visit taxresolution.com/GBTV.
Freedom Connector puts the power back in your hands.
This is social organizing. It actually helps connect you with people in your own backyard.
It has no boundaries. We can link with any groups throughout the country.
We're just trying to lower barriers of connection, lower the costs of participating.
It's all about coalition building, teamwork, team building. It's a giant network.
It's in your hands. Log on to Freedom Connector today. Set up your profile, start connecting with other patriots, make your voice heard, and help take our country back.
I live alone, so when I slipped and fell in the kitchen last month and couldn't get to a phone, that's when I knew I needed Life Alert. With just one press of this button, I'm connected to the Life Alert Center, where I can get the help I need, even when I cannot reach a phone. With Life Alert, I'm never alone.
Call 1-800-996-6392 for your free Life Alert brochure. That's 1-800-996-6392. Call today.
Coming up on Real News, Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker's reforms have taken a chunk out of the state's $3 billion budget deficit without raising taxes or killing jobs. And yet you're not hearing any of that in the mainstream media's coverage of his upcoming recall election. As Wisconsin gets ready for the pivotal June 5th vote, we'll take a look at the national implications, the political influence of special interests at the expense of the people, and the big plans Big Labor has for the rest of the country. It's all a part of our special report, Showdown Wisconsin. That's up next, right after Glenn at 6 o'clock.
No, Pete, we shouldn't ban the Nazis. We should just learn about them and know who they are so we recognize them and what the seeds are that make them grow. I want to take a turn here and go to the communists a bit. Show me your friends and I'll show you your future. President Obama mocks those who call him a socialist or a Marxist, but I want you to look at all the Marxists around him. And let's start with the latest. Yet another one of his advisors. This is a guy who sits on the Financial Stability Oversight Council. I don't even know what that is. He's trying to make the case now for class warfare on his blog. And while he did so yesterday, he extensively quoted Karl Marx from Das Kapital. Now, how many capitalists do you know make their points by quoting Das Kapital? Karl Marx, do you know a single capitalist who's like, you know what, let me tell you something Karl Marx said, they're really going to work for me? None. Zero. How many capitalist presidents have we had that hire Marxist financial advisors? None. Zero. Another Obama administration favorite communist, Van Jones, former Green Jobs czar at the White House. He was addressing the Green Festival in Chicago just this last weekend, where he talked about how special he is since he went from the president's inner circle back to being on the outside of the White House. And he's got important things to say. Watch.
Maybe that's why our opponents were so interested in shutting me up. And so, surprise! I'm back! for you going forward. Don't ever let somebody like me in the White House and then insist that I come back out here with all of y'all. Because now we can make this thing work.
What he's saying is he's more dangerous on the outside than the inside. He said, don't ever let a guy like me into the White House and then put me back out in the public, because now I can accomplish all the things I tried when I was in the administration. I can make them all work now. And he's right. It's why when everybody was saying, hey, you got Van Jones' scalp on your wall. No, I don't. No, I don't. I don't want it there. I didn't want him fired. I wanted an explanation, because he is more dangerous on the outside, because everyone dismisses him. Now, let's also see how he handled a question that he didn't like from a reporter. Play the tape here. Watch.
Mr. Jones, I'm asking you a legitimate question. You said in your speech, somebody like you shouldn't be allowed in the White House. Can you just go into a little more detail on why somebody like you shouldn't be able to go into the White House? The guy said he shouldn't be allowed to go into the White House. What? Can you just clarify what you meant by that, Mr. Jones? You said a guy like you shouldn't be allowed to go into the credentialed press.
We're trying to keep moving, though.
Okay.
We're trying to keep it moving.
That's fine. I'll let him move. You answer the question, I'll go away, Mr. Jones. I'm credentialed press, dude.
That's fine, man. We reserve the right.
Okay, I'll leave. You don't need to escort me.
Okay. I'll walk you out.
No problem.
Yeah, well, we're going to need your badge, please.
Why?
Because you're not going to be allowed back in. I'm sorry.
Why is that?
Because you're not going to be allowed in. You can't accost our speakers. Step outside, please.
Accosting? All you're doing is asking why. Here's a guy who claimed he was shut up in the past by critics, and now he's shutting down the press when all they do is question him about something he just said in the speech. What does that mean? As I saw this, I couldn't help but notice the similarities between that and the way the Nazi Party in Greece treated reporters over the weekend. I showed this tape to you yesterday. If you don't like it, get out. That's what Van Jones did. Van Jones also said the same thing these guys said. You need to fear. You need to fear. Same in Greece. The only difference is that both flags are red. It's just the symbol that is different in the middle. The tactics are the same. The outcome is the same. But Van Jones says it with a smile because we're in America. He had to, and this is his words, drop the radical pose for the radical ends. Be on guard, America, for Van Jones. I'm taking it at his word. He's back, but I don't believe he ever went away. But if you'd indulge me for just a second, I don't have a hotline to Van Jones. I don't call the man. I don't write the man. I don't have him on speed dial, so I'd like to deliver a personal message to Van Jones. Van, I know exactly who you are. I know what you're capable of. I have studied you as much as you have studied me. It's funny. It's funny that you say that your enemies got you out of the White House and now you're more dangerous. It's funny to me because I know who you're talking about. And I also know that you and your friends take credit for getting me out of the mainstream media. So if I may, Van, just quote a communist. Don't ever let somebody like me in and then insist that I come back out. I too am more dangerous on the outside because I too am now free to accomplish the things I know need to be done.
Preparation, focus, hard work. It's a personal commitment. It's what drives me. It gives me the confidence to look my opponent in the eye and say, game on. Preparing for life's future challenges is just as important. Food Insurance Emergency Food Supply gives me the same assurance that I'm ready for whatever comes my way. Preparation is everything. Order today at foodinsurance.com.
You look so beautiful, but you're about to lose everything.
You're gonna lose everything.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here
You're gonna lose your files.
There's no warning when you lose your computer files. That's why you need Carbonite Online Backup. So whatever happens, your files are safe. Try it for free at Carbonite.com.
Freedom Connector puts the power back in your hands.
This is social organizing. It actually helps connect you with people in your own backyard.
It has no boundaries. We can link with any groups throughout the country.
We're just trying to lower barriers of connection, lower the costs of participating.
It's all about coalition building, teamwork, team building. It's a giant network.
It's in your hands. Log on to Freedom Connector today. Set up your profile, start connecting with other patriots, make your voice heard, and help take our country back.
Okay, so has anybody actually started saving for college yet?
Oh, not me.
No, you got time.
Oh, no, we
Yeah.
actually started.
You have?
Really? Sure. We figure you start saving a little now, or you'll borrow a lot later on.
Yeah, but how did you even know where to start?
Oh, I found out about the Gerber Life College Plan.
Call now for free information on the Gerber Life College Plan. It's easy.
It's pretty much worry-free.
Well, how could it be worry-free? What if something happens with the stock market?
No matter what happens, we get guaranteed safe growth.
So when she's ready for college, the money will be there.
And it doesn't take a lot of money to get started.
For as little as $10 a week, you can start saving for college and get guaranteed growth. Just call now.
Oh, it's a life insurance policy, too.
Oh, that's different.
And if she decides not to go to college, there's no penalty, so she can use the money for anything.
We've got to get started.
Yes, we do, because you're going to college.
Call 1-800-892-3073 for your free information. That's 1-800-892-3073.
Ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Wrath and Righteousness. Available now at mercuryinc.com or wherever ebooks are sold.
This is my company is Mercury, and this is a Mercury Inc. book. I read the published versions of this book 6 years ago while I was on vacation, and it is not the same book now. But as I read this book, I couldn't tell the difference between fact and fiction because it was all what was happening. And I called I think I was in the Bahamas, and I called this author. I didn't even know if it was the same Chris Stewart, but I called him at home, and I said, "Hi, you don't know me, but I'm Glenn Beck, and I'm a fan of your books, and I want to know if you're the author of this series." And he got really quiet on the phone and laughed and said, "Okay, first of all, yes, I do know who you are." And I said, I just wanted to know how much of this book was written on prompting. He's far too modest of a guy and too polite to ever give me an answer to that question, but I think I know the answer to that question. Because, let me give you a quote from the book. Remember, this was written almost 10 years ago. Quote, "Syria hanging by a thread, its leader shooting his own people as if they were at war. Lebanon the same, Oman the same, Yemen, Bahrain, Egypt had been taken over by Islamic fundamentalists, all in the name of democracy. An irony so fresh it would have been hilarious if it hadn't been so sad." Wrath and Righteousness. The author of the book is Chris Stewart. And Chris has updated this series, and we've changed it a bit because honestly, Chris, how many times did I tell you, got to get this book out before it's history?
Yeah, we needed it out last year.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
You won't give me the percent. Will you ever share about what you feel, where this book came from? Because this is inspired writing.
Well, like I said to you earlier, Glenn, I think maybe we got lucky on a couple of things.
Okay, all right. Luck stuff. It is, we're putting it out now because, like I said, I think it's becoming history. I mean, just that part, and there's several parts of it now that if you didn't know you wrote it 10 years ago, you would just think you were just, which makes me nervous, Chris, because like me, as I'm saying, look, Nazis are going to come to power, communists are going to come to power, these things are going to happen. As more of them do, I almost scare myself because I realize, holy cow, that means that, I mean, on this trajectory, the really bad things at the other end are true as well.
Yeah.
Do you feel that way?
Well, and following your point, the worst is still to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, the things that happen in this book, we just barely scratched the surface with that description you read there. The very worst things are still to happen.
Oh no, this is like taking zip strip to your face. I mean, when it gets rolling, when is it in the episodes? The third episode
probably the fourth.
Fourth episode.
Yeah, towards the end, and then the fourth is when we really get into it.
Then it doesn't stop.
Yeah.
It's like when I said I read them all. I think I read the first two before I went on vacation, and then I brought the rest of them with me, just in case. And I think I got to about the third episode, and I read them all because I couldn't stop, because it just goes.
Yeah. Well, you're very kind, so thank you for that. But you know, I want to come back to your point about, you know, how do you know? I don't think it's that hard. I think you can look at some of these things, and it doesn't take a genius or a prophet to say this is a plausible scenario. I mean, we could look at what's happening in Northern Africa. We could look at happening in various countries around the Middle East. And I think we could, with a group of just 4 or 5 average people, say this is what we think would happen in 4 or 5 years from now. And I think we'd be pretty close.
This book, I don't want to. We can give away what the main impact on America is. Yeah. The main impact on America, and it's like the third book, maybe the fourth book. When it all starts to hit the fan, there's a lot of setup in this book, but when it starts to hit the fan, an EMP is set off in a very plausible way.
Yeah.
What happens, I'm telling you, what happens to Israel is going to happen.
Yeah.
And it all starts to happen in a very plausible way, and an EMP goes off. And if anybody really wants to know what an EMP is like, this would be it.
Yeah, and it's a bad deal. It's a bad deal for everyone. Everyone in the nation. You know, any other terrorist scenario you look at, you know, a likely attack on Washington, D.C. or New York, or wherever it might be, by and large it leaves, you know, most of us unaffected by it, other than, you know, on the peripheral or emotionally. But an EMP impacts immediately everyone in the United States and puts them immediately in a very, very dangerous situation.
Can you show me? I have this United States Senate Committee on Judiciary. Tell me what this is.
Well, that was out in 2005. It's been updated last summer. It looks at the threat of an EMP and its impact, and it looks at the likelihood of it. You know, you take a single nuclear warhead, not much bigger than was used in Hiroshima in World War II. You detonate it at altitude, not on the surface or near the surface. Creates this electromagnetic pulse which fries virtually every circuit, everything that works off electricity. Your cell phones, your cars, refrigeration, ATMs, banks, everything.
I'll tell you, Chris, what makes this different, did you read 1 Second After?
I did not.
Okay.
Yeah.
1 Second After is a great book, and it's about 1 second after an EMP goes off and what happens to this town. But it is not nearly as compelling as what you've done, because what you've done is mix. You know, Tim LaHaye is coming in for a show on Friday. He wrote the Left Behind series. And what this has in it that no other book that I've seen besides Left Behind is this mix. This mix is religious.
Yeah.
It has scripture from the Bible in it. Satan plays a role, and it shows how we're all just pawns for good and evil, a global game.
And I think that's such an important part. I mean, that is the heart of this book. The heart of this book is the battle between good and evil. It's a battle that takes place internationally. It's a battle that takes place nationally. It's a battle that takes place individually.
Right.
And we try to illustrate that through the book and through the characters.
And again, there's another part that I think is very plausible and feasible, and it's what really I've been trying to get to for so long. There is an answer, and it shows in this book. It shows these incredible people who have spiritually prepared themselves, even though they didn't know any of this was going to happen. They're not, they're not saying these things are going to happen. It'll take them by surprise, but they have prepared themselves spiritually to be the ones who, in the end, against all odds,
that make a difference.
Make a difference. Yeah. Make a difference.
Yep, and they're not presidents, they're not senators, they're not generals, they're just normal people in some cases.
When you see the, again, I'm skipping ahead on episodes, but I don't want to give anything away, but when you see the scene with the president towards the end, do you know what scene I'm talking about, where they're kind of making deals and
kind of dividing things up? And
it is, I read that, Chris, and I'm telling you, it's all true. It's all going to happen.
Yeah.
It's all going to happen. When I called you that time out of the blue, you must have thought I was nuts.
Well, as I've said to you, you go, "Hey, Chris, this is Glenn Beck," and I go, "Right."
That's right. You did say that. Right.
I thought, okay, is this Sid? Is this Bob? Who is this really?
And it was. I called you because there were things in this book that I set up in bed in the middle of the night, 2 o'clock in the morning. I'll never forget it. I read it, and I sat up in bed, and I was terrified because I felt those exact words in prayer. Mm-hmm. I have heard those words in prayer. Yeah. Warn the people of this.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that, Glenn.
It was. Do you remember what scene it was?
Well, no, I don't remember, but I remember you telling me that that you'd had that experience.
Word for word. You wrote word for word.
Yeah.
And I gave this book, the series of book, to several of the people that work for Mercury, and I asked them to read it, and all of us had the same experience. You could no longer watch television and figure out the difference. You get about halfway through this series, you will not be able to tell the difference between fact and fiction because it's all happening. Mm-hmm. And all the players are there, and you have to stop and think, wait a minute, no, that's the book.
Yeah.
And it's frightening.
Well, and I come back to this earlier point, which I think we're going to talk about on Friday, is this individual spiritual battle too, this battle to be prepared, this battle to stay together, this battle to keep our faith. At the end of the day, it's a very hopeful book.
It is.
I mean, it really is about hope. It's about faith. It's about we can get through this. Individually, there will be miracles in people's lives that will help us get through this.
There's a point in the book where people are just standing by the side of the freeway.
Yeah.
And they're waiting for help.
Yeah.
And the people who are just acting, who are just smart, and some of them are military, so they know.
Yeah.
And they know there's just a few hours before things break loose.
Yeah.
And you see what's going on in that highway, and you see all these people just standing around for help, and you get to this point in the book, and you're just like, they're all dead.
Yeah.
They're all going to be dead. They're all going to be a slave to someone else because they don't know.
Yep, it's on 495, the Beltway around Washington, D.C., and we envision, everyone's stranded there because their cars or vehicles no longer work, and some of them just stay there. They just,
they don't know what to do.
So unsure or unconfident or just have no plan, no idea. It's just that they're just going to stay in their cars and die there. And a few people realize we have to take care of ourselves now.
And others realize no one's coming to help these people.
Well,
I can control them or do whatever I want.
Yeah.
It's an amazing series of book. If you're a member, you're here, so you're obviously a member of GBTV. The first episode is absolutely free. It's like $3, I think.
Whose idea was that, by the way?
Mine. The first one is free. And I warn you, when you're reading the first episode, it's a lot of setup. But you will thank the setup as it goes on. It's like watching a TV show over 10 episodes over 1 year. But once you get into it, I'm telling you, I printed this for a reason, and I printed it for your friends as well. They need to know what's coming. They need to see the possibilities, and they need to see the good possibilities as well. This will do it. Ebook only. You can get it now. Check it all out at mercuryinc.com or glenbeck.com. It's free to you because you're a subscriber of GBTV. Get it and pass it on. Chris, thanks. We'll see you on Friday.
Always a pleasure.
Back in a minute. This is something that nobody's ever tried to do before. It's only going to be sold in an ebook fashion. It's an amazing thriller about the battle between light and darkness. When Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971, the average price of an ounce of gold was $40. Today, the cost of gold is 40 times that. That's not because gold is more valuable, it's because the dollar is deflating. You want to protect your savings? Find out about gold. Find out if gold or silver or precious metals is right for you. I want you to call Goldline today. The number is 800-757-GOLD. I also want to tell you that they have the 1812 commemorative coin, which is a quarter ounce of gold. It makes it easier to split up with the family. It makes it easier to get into because gold is getting more and more expensive and will only continue to do so. And it is a commemorative coin. Goldline is the only one that is selling this and allowed to offer it from the Canadian Mint. It's the 1812 coin from Canada. Check it out now, goldline.com, 1-800-757-GOLD.
Freedom Connector puts the power back in your hands.
This is social organizing. It actually helps connect you with people in your own backyard.
It has no boundaries. We can link with any groups throughout the country.
We're just trying to lower barriers of connection, lower the costs of participating.
It's all about coalition building, teamwork, team building. It's a giant network.
It's in your hands. Log on to Freedom Connector today. Set up your profile, start connecting with other patriots, make your voice heard, and help take our country back.
Tatler Reusable Canning Lids. Family owned since 1976. That's right, Tatler Reusable Canning Lids. Yes, reusable with a lifetime guarantee. Made in America, BPA free. Tatler Reusable Canning Lids. Because those who can, do. Get rid of the disposable lid. Go to reusablecanninglids.com. Tatler Reusable Canning Lids.
When it's warm, you'd love to open every door and let fresh air into your home. The trouble is, you'd end up letting lots of bugs into your home as well. Now there's Magic Mesh, the new type of screen door that opens easily and then magically closes itself behind you. The secret isn't really magic, it's magnets, 18 magnets to be exact. When you separate them, they automatically snap back together. That makes it great for pets too, because instead of scratching and whining, they can come and go as they please. So let the fresh air in and keep those annoying bugs out with Magic Mesh, a $40 value, yours for just $19.95. But wait, call right now and we'll double the offer. Just pay separate processing and handling. You get 2 Magic Mesh curtains for just $19.95. Don't delay. Call and order yours today.
To order Magic Mesh for $19.95 plus processing and handling, call 1-800-572-9265 or log on to buymagicmesh.com.
Bringing a firearm into your home is one of the most important decisions you can make. If you are considering gun ownership, CheaperThanDirt.com is here to help you make a responsible and informed choice. We understand it is a personal decision how you choose to protect your family. We offer thousands of choices of firearms, ammunition, and accessories to suit your individual needs. Be responsible, be proactive, and exercise your Second Amendment right. Find us online at CheaperThanDirt.com. That's CheaperThanDirt.com.
Okay, coming up next from The Blaze, we have an entire hour on Wisconsin's effort to recall Governor Scott Walker, including a special screening of the documentary Showdown Wisconsin. This is really important because it tells us what's coming. If they fail, it tells us what's coming in the rest of the country. From Dallas, good night, America.
What they're talking about is return, really, to the days of double-digit tax increases, billion-dollar budget deficits, and record job losses. We've had thousands of people bust in front of my home, not just the residents, but literally my home. If we failed to win this battle, this will set aside any sort of courageous act in American politics, at least a decade, if not a generation.
Welcome to our Real News Special Report, Showdown, Wisconsin. The effort to recall the state's governor, Scott Walker, has captured nationwide attention because it has implications that go beyond just Wisconsin politics. Special interest groups from around the United States have poured money into the state in the hopes of unseating Walker, whose reform policies have earned the rancor of public sector unions and progressive activists. Today, Wisconsin voters head to the polls to choose the Democratic opponent who will ultimately face Governor Walker in the recall election, which is scheduled for June 5th, just less than a month away. Recent polls show that Milwaukee Mayor Tom Barrett has a comfortable lead over his closest rival, State Senator Kathleen Falk. If Barrett wins tonight, the recall will be a rematch of the 2010 contest that put Walker in office in the first place. But while Wisconsin politics might be the focus of the mainstream media, we want to talk about what's at stake for the entire country. Well, luckily for us, one filmmaker decided to investigate the matter for himself, the results of which we're excited to bring to you tonight. Amy Walker is that filmmaker, and Amy, welcome.
It's a pleasure.
Great to have you.
If I could be on the 5, I'm glad I could be here.
Likewise. So you decided to dive into Wisconsin to go investigate. Why?
Because Glenn asked me to. So I do what the man says. No, actually, I came to him with the idea. I mean, it's an incredibly important race, and it's obviously last year it was above the radar. With all the massive protests he had there, everybody knew what was going on. But since then, it kind of went away from the national consciousness, and I thought that was something that was important to bring back because this race is happening, and I think it has national implications, and I thought I'd have a little fun there.
So what did you like best?
I mean, who doesn't want to go to Wisconsin in the middle of March?
So when you were there, did you find that how the mainstream media was reporting it at the national level was different from how Wisconsin voters were experiencing it?
No. I mean, when they were covering it, I mean, the rancor is pretty clear. I mean, you're on either one side of the fence or the other side of the fence. There really isn't any in between. I think the undecideds in this race are, I don't know, 2, 3, 4%. They're tiny. People know what the deal is, and I think people are covering it in the same way the national media did, very aggressively, with a lot of vitriol.
You know, I mean, this story, it's got to be more than just a story about Wisconsin. Honestly, that idea while you're sitting around, let me go do a story on Wisconsin. Let me do a story on Scott Walker. I doubt that's really what was going through it. It had to be representative of something more, something going on in this country. What is that? If you could boil that down into, one tagline, what is Wisconsin?
Well, maybe he's a Packer fan. You don't know why he wanted to go to Wisconsin.
God, I hope that's not your answer.
Give us Cheeseheads a break here.
If that's not your answer, and by the way, if it is, please feel free to inform us. But if it's not, why should this matter to the rest of us? Why should Wisconsin matter?
I brought you guys some gifts.
I
don't have an answer to that, so I'm going to think about it.
Are they Packer related?
One thing Wisconsin is known for is good beer.
I take that as well.
So why don't we enjoy some Wisconsin Pale Ale?
PBR is home in Milwaukee.
Yeah, we're not going to be drinking that.
Well, it's the best, but that's fine. I'll settle
So now
for
is a good point while you're getting out the beer to also mention, Ami, that I know where you were when you were sitting around thinking about this idea because you and I live in the same building. We live in the same building with Michael Moore, for that matter.
We do. By the way, I went to see a movie with the other night. Did I say that?
No.
We walked together down to... Everybody drinking, by the way, or just me?
Oh,
Serve them up, Ami. But here's the deal. I now know why I see you in the gym all the time.
Right.
Because in this documentary, which we're about to show, there's some scenes where you're barely clothed.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
My
bring
wife
this
is
back
not
right
that
now.
proud of that.
Ami, as I alluded, I'm a big Packer fan.
So you want the tagline? I thought of a tagline. Can I, May?
Sure.
What happens in Wisconsin doesn't stay in Wisconsin.
Nice. Well done.
Very good.
All within 15 seconds of bring out the
Okay. I've spent a lot of time in Wisconsin. I was recently just in Milwaukee, and I've been all over the state. Oh, I love it there. I love Wisconsin. I'm a big Packer fan, as I said. Hunting is awesome there. Great fishing as well. I liked the documentary, but I noticed you really only took to Madison. Did you get a sense of what people outside of the capital city are feeling about Walker? I get the sense that it's pretty divided.
Nope, I didn't get that sense at all. I only stayed in Madison.
Oh, okay.
So, where everybody's really bearded and they wear their pants really low. It's all very hippie, very crunchy. So, you know, even in Madison, it's pretty divided. I mean, it's a very liberal city. We spent some time in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
And sitting around at restaurants and bars, we talked to people and hotels. And no, I did feel that it seemed almost even.
Yeah, my only point was it seems like Madison is such a progressive liberal stronghold, and the rest of the state is not.
Right.
When I go and visit, it's a pretty conservative state, a lot like New York is.
Milwaukee's a little, you know, I think it's a pretty liberal place also. But that's really the two strongholds. The rest of the state is easily very conservative.
All right, well, Ami, with no further ado, can you set up your piece for us?
Sure. Like I said, it was me deciding to. This is an important issue. You know, in what way could I kind of bring this back, the national consciousness, and me, you know, walking around and trying to figure out what people feel like in Wisconsin, and interviewing the governor, I thought was the best way of doing it. Interviewing actually both sides. We have somebody in there who's obviously very supportive of getting him out of there. And I thought it was important for people to see what was going on, so I cut this piece.
All right, roll tape.
Seeing how high the stakes are for this recall, I wanted to get a sense of how well known Scott Walker is among the New York Times reading, latte-sipping intelligentsia class of the Upper West Side of Manhattan, also known as Home Sweet Home. Sorry, do you know who Scott Walker is?
Scott Walker. Rings a bell. I should know. You gonna give me a hint?
Do you know who Scott Walker is?
No idea.
No? Do you know who Scott Walker is?
No.
No. Excuse me. Do you know who Scott Walker is?
No.
Do you know who Governor Scott Walker is?
No, not at all.
Do you know who Scott Walker is?
I do not, sir.
Do you know who Scott Walker is?
I don't. I'm going to say a politician, potentially.
Why don't we ask some regular folk? Do you know who Scott Walker is?
Governor of Wisconsin, who wants to bust the unions.
I figured I should probably go to Wisconsin and take a closer look at what was going on there. After pitching the idea, Glenn Beck opened up his generous checkbook and sent us on our way. When we first caught up with Governor Walker in Wisconsin, he was giving a speech on one of his favorite topics, creating opportunities for businesses in Wisconsin. He was speaking at a manufacturing plant in Milwaukee called P&H, a maker of mining equipment that exports to every part of the globe. It's also a union shop. Governor Walker's mantra is Wisconsin is open for business, and he's really tried to live up to those words. His devotion to creating a better environment for commerce has totally changed the perception of Wisconsin within the business community. Prior to Walker taking office, the Chamber of Commerce took a survey of major business owners and found that only 10% thought Wisconsin was headed in the right direction. Now, 94% say it is. Chief Executive Magazine found that Wisconsin's business climate in 2011 showed the greatest one-year improvement of any state in the history of the magazine's ratings. Kurt Bauer is the head of the state's largest financial industry trade group. What has Scott Walker done to make Wisconsin a more business-friendly environment?
In the last 12 months, we've enacted over 20 pieces of legislation that we would consider to be very pro-business. They range from tax breaks for manufacturers that we think is very important because manufacturing is our #1 business sector in Wisconsin. We've also addressed some regulatory issues. So we've addressed a variety of different things across the board to try and make this state more pro-business. And we had a ways to go.
We lowered the tax burden on job creators and investors, on entrepreneurs and people who invest in Wisconsin-based businesses. We streamlined the regulatory process so that we can enforce common sense, but we get rid of the excessive red tape that stands in the way of small businesses. We pulled back on the things that allowed frivolous lawsuits to attack our farmers and our small businesses. We did all these things right off the bat, and the great news is it's had results.
In the 3 years prior to Walker taking over the State House, Wisconsin bled 150,000 jobs. In the first 12 months he was in office, Wisconsin not only stopped the bleeding, it added 10,000 jobs.
Well, he came in with a mission. He wanted to create jobs, and he knew the best way to do that was to empower the private sector economy. And so the reforms have reflected that. He has done things that have unleashed businesses so that they can create jobs.
We've gained jobs this past year. The unemployment rate is down from a year ago. It's not only down from a year ago, it's down lower since it's been since 2008. And our employers are feeling it.
Despite what Governor Walker has done, essentially turned the fiscal woes of Wisconsin on its head in 12 short months. The opposition to Governor Walker has collected over 1 million signatures to recall him from office, almost half of all the votes cast in the last election. So we had a $3 billion budget deficit.
3.6 billion.
Don't correct me on my own show. Okay, $3.6 billion budget deficit. And you turned it into a $300 million surplus. How exactly did you do that?
Well, you look at other states, it's interesting. We weren't alone. Nearly every state in America last year had a budget deficit. And other states chose some of the other options that typically are done. Illinois, for example, raised taxes. Other states relied on massive layoffs. I don't want to lay anybody off, public or private. Some states made major reductions in things like Medicaid. We actually added money for Medicaid, which provides your safety net for seniors and needy families and children. To balance that $3.6 billion budget deficit, we did it the way that most people would do it in their homes and in their families and with their small businesses. We put in place long-term structural reforms that ultimately led us to balance both our state as well as our local government budgets.
Do you think the average Wisconsinian, do you think the average cheesehead understood the depth of your financial problem?
Oh, I think there's no doubt about it. If I had anything to do over again from last year, it would have been spend more time last January and February building the case. I came in like a small business owner and said, here's a problem, here's a solution, now just fix it. I figured the majority of people in this state elected me to fix it. I mean, I went out and interviewed for the job of governor for about 18 months. I told the people of the state we faced both an economic and a fiscal crisis. And then I told people what I do very clearly. I spelled out what I would do. And so when I took office, I figured I didn't need to sell it all over again. I didn't need to have another campaign. Well, hindsight's 20/20.
Governor Walker is attempting to wean public sector workers off of the crack cocaine of government, also known as entitlements, that were among the most generous in the nation. He required the employees of Wisconsin's retirement system to pay less than 6% of their salary into their pension plan. Currently, they pay little or nothing toward their pensions. All of it was being paid by the state. He also required that state employees pay 12.6% of their cost of their annual health care premiums, still well below what private sector employees pay. And most controversial of all, he nixed collective bargaining, including making union dues voluntary. But these cuts were, according to the governor, necessary for the well-being of the state, and decided to go ahead with them despite the political difficulties that he knew would come from taking on public sector entitlements. And difficulty sure did follow. Governor Walker has become one of the most polarizing figures in American politics, and his fight with public sector unions has made him target number one among big labor around the country. For weeks, the state capitol in Wisconsin was roiled with protesters from around the country. One woman chained her head to a railing in the assembly chambers while a floor session was going on, and some union thugs poured beer, albeit tasty Wisconsin beer, over the heads of lawmakers. I mean, aren't pension benefits and health care benefits considered the third rail of politics? I mean, what gave you the cojones to grab onto that thing and hold on?
What I like to think is this is what voters elect us to do. We thought more about the next generation than we did about the next election.
Despite the protests, Governor Walker felt like he had no choice but to make these moves because Madison's finances were in complete disarray when he arrived at the State House. Unemployment, the budget deficit, and high taxes were all conspiring to cripple the finances of Wisconsin. And Walker was elected on the platform of putting Wisconsin's fiscal house in order.
When you look at the people who are the Democrats who are advocating for the recall, the ones who want to run for office, what they're talking about is return, really, to the days of double-digit tax increases, billion-dollar budget deficits, and record job loss. That's what we had before. All those bills have come due. And so sooner or later, just like someone in their own home and their own small business, the bills catch up and you got nowhere to turn. Our time had come. We couldn't wait, and so we took action.
Richard Essenberg is a Marquette University law professor and is the president of the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty.
These reforms reduced the political influence of public employee unions, and I think that reduction in influence, as opposed to the fact that we have to pay 5% of our salary towards our own retirement, or we have to pay 12% of our health care premium, that reduction in influence is, I think, what has caused much of the sort of the chaos and hostility that we've seen here over the past year.
Who's your political role model?
Without a doubt, Ronald Reagan. And not just because he was conservative or Republican, but in the end, what I loved about President Reagan, what I've tried to replicate, is his unbelievably incredible enthusiasm in the American people.
The comparisons between the two are eerie. Ronald Reagan was a massive movie star with rugged good looks who ran one of the largest states in the nation. Governor Walker, well, he's a slightly dorky Midwesterner who runs a backwater state. Where the comparison gets interesting is that in 1981, thousands of air traffic controllers walked off the job hoping to disrupt the nation's transportation system in order to get higher wages. Ronald Reagan famously shot back with a stern ultimatum: get back to work or be fired. 11,000 air traffic controllers lost their jobs. Now, Scott Walker's in a high-profile battle with another powerful group of unions in Wisconsin, with the outcome currently unclear.
Most of us realize we're in this together and that we don't want massive layoffs, we don't want massive tax increases. Those things will hurt the economy. And instead, what we did, some may argue with, critique the way that we did it, but in the end, I think most people see the results have brought about a better economy and a better budget.
Obviously, there are many who disagree with the action that the governor took, including full-time union head and part-time Santa, Marty Beal. He called the Democratic Senate Majority Leader a whore and a Democratic state senator a prostitute because they decided to work with the governor on solving their differences. We tried to reach the silver-tongued Mr. Beal, but it was pretty tough to get a hold of him, seeing that his union office closes at 4:30.
We get up at 12 and start to work at 1. Take one off for lunch and then at 2 we're done. Jolly good fun.
We did meet with Malon Mitchell, the head of the Professional Firefighters of Wisconsin, one of the unions back in the recall. Seeing that this interview had the potential to get testy, I decided to start with an icebreaker. So a union guy walks into a brothel, and he says, how much for the girl? Madam says $100. Well, how much does the girl keep and how much does the house keep? She goes, well, we keep 75, she keeps 25. He goes, that's not fair. He walks out. Goes to the next brothel. Same question. Same answer. 75 for the house, 25 for the girl. He goes, forget it. That's not fair. He walks out. Walks to a third brothel. Says, same question. How much does the house keep? She goes, we keep 25 and the girl gets 75. We're a union brothel. He goes, perfect. I'll take her. And she goes, See that 85-year-old woman over there, Ethel? She has seniority.
I'm going to use that. I've never heard that. That's good.
Then we got into it.
But you can't balance the budget on the backs of the middle class.
How is Governor Walker's policies an attack on the middle class?
Most of the middle class goes to public schools.
But I mean, Governor Walker's kids go to public schools.
They do.
I mean,
I actually would somewhat look at Governor Walker as part of the middle class.
Sure.
But he's beholden to corporations and the wealthy.
When it comes to things like education, it's not a funding issue. It's about spending our money more wisely. And our reforms allowed our schools and our local governments and our state government to spend the taxpayers' money more wisely.
The bitterness of the debate has created an extremely partisan and vitriolic political environment. The toxic atmosphere has made any attempt at compromise almost impossible. What it did create was a whole lot of anti-Walker songs.
This next one's called Walker. I see you demonizing workers, cutting bargaining rights, and I'm like, you. I see you trample workers down in the state I love, and I'm like, you.
But not all the songs were anti-Walker.
So send in the stormtroopers, bring on the droids, cause this Jedi Knight's about to kick your ass. My governor's a Jedi, I know without a doubt he's got a saber in his pocket. Don't make him whip it out.
For some Walker attackers, even 14-year-old girls weren't off limits.
We gathered here on that day. None of us.
Did you think it was going to get this bad? Did you think that there was going to be this level of ferocity against you and against your fiscal plans and your reforms?
We've had thousands of people bust in front of my home, not just the residents, but literally my home in Wauwatosa where my kids still go to school. I've had my kids get grief on Facebook. I've had my mother in her 70s and my youngest son, a 16-year-old, screamed at a grocery store. I mean, to me, that's just not the Wisconsin way.
Has you or your family been threatened in this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't talk at great length to them for obvious reasons, but I've had, stacks of them.
You say that pretty casually. It's not a casual thing.
No, but I mean, to me, it is what it is. And the reality is I don't do anything unnecessary to put myself in harm's way. On the other hand, I don't allow it to stop me. I go out to farms and family businesses and small businesses and others around the state. I'm certainly not going to stop it from what I was elected to do, which was I was elected to help the people of the state create more jobs and keep their fiscal house in order. What has been unusual has been the past year seeing just how intense and out of control things have been, and I think in many ways that's a reflection of these out-of-state special interests.
The protests were fueled by outside influences, which channeled in millions of dollars and brought in protesters from around the country. Their goal was to keep the spotlight on Wisconsin and the pressure on Walker.
And the reason why the national unions are playing in Wisconsin is to send a message: don't take us on.
It's the distorted nature of the out-of-state special interest money coming in early last year, continuing out the year, the money and the bodies that have come in from elsewhere, because they really realize what's at stake.
The media covered this story extensively, and at times with some real eloquence.
Begins in the state of Wisconsin a national drive to push back, or whether we have more to go to build a movement of resistance. But resist we much. We must and we will much. About that be committed.
Maybe if we hear that a second time, it'll make more sense.
But resist we much. We must and we will much. About that be committed.
No, still gibberish. Public sector doctors felt that this fight was so important to the health of Wisconsin that they decided to take a day off from the health of their patients.
We need a doctor's note for work. There are doctors on the corner signing notes.
We are writing sick notes for anybody who needs them.
Who's sick?
Well, everybody is sick of Scott Walker. We are here writing the doctor's notes to support our public employees who have been mentally anguished and distressed this last week and needed to be out here for their mental health.
Many of the protesters advocate a more European-style economic system. The results of those policies are abundantly evident today. Europe is an entitlement-based society where cradle-to-grave care is the norm. These entitlements have cost Europe dearly and have nearly bankrupted an entire state. Greece can't pay its debts, and it's had to go to the European Union hand in hand to ask for a bailout, and has lost its ability to control its own destiny. There are many European countries that are not far behind Greece, and almost every country in Europe has had to implement crippling fiscal austerity programs, triggering massive protests and wide-scale vandalism with no end in sight.
The problem is that's where our country's headed. And it's not just state by state, it's our country as a whole. And again, I want my kids to inherit not only Wisconsin, but an America even greater than the one that I inherited and that my generation inherited. And to me, every day I'm more and more concerned that that's not going to happen. And to me, that's just fundamentally unacceptable.
Oddly, many of the Wisconsin protesters are advocating for the U.S. to more closely emulate the European entitlement model, despite the economic tsunami that Europe is currently experiencing. I decided to go to one of the daily protests at the Capitol. These people have been coming to the state capitol every day for a year to do a sing-along, protesting Governor Walker's moves and advocating for his recall. We decided to find out a little more about them and, of course, have a little bit of fun. Do you feel we're living in a less free state because of Governor Walker?
Oh, definitely. He took away a lot of freedom.
He's definitely authoritarian. I think if we don't arrest it, it's going to keep getting worse. It could go that bad.
I talked to a lot of the people I used to work with, state employees, and they lost the freedom even to be able to talk about things. You know, in the building, you could pretty well talk what you wanted to before, which could have been union, it could have been about the governor, it could be about, and they really have to watch it now because most of them are fearful of their jobs.
They can't talk about? They can't even talk freely?
No. You got to watch what you say when you're at
That's
work.
like a totalitarian state.
Exactly.
Who would make a better governor than Scott Walker? Scott Walker or Vladimir Putin?
Oh, I suppose Walker.
I was like, give him that. Would you rather have Scott Walker or Vladimir Putin?
I said I'd rather have anybody than Scott Walker.
Almost anyone here would make a better governor.
Did he lie?
You would make a better governor.
I don't know about that.
Cameraman would make a better governor.
He definitely would not make
Almost
a better
anybody. people in Europe probably got inspiration from them, from the Milwaukee sewer socialists.
So what's wrong with that?
Absolutely nothing. I'm a small-s socialist. I think that the United States of America, with its grand traditions, could do with more of the Milwaukee style. We are together in this, and we're going to unite together and work together as a community and society. I have the old-fashioned notion that it really does take a village to raise a child and keep them healthy.
I mean, have you been to Greece? I've been to Greece.
I've never been to Greece.
Greece is pretty awesome.
Greece, yeah, I've heard that Greece is awesome.
Yeah.
I've been to France, I've been to England. I think they're very awesome. I think they're places that we should love and embrace rather than envy and disparage.
First of all, I enjoy being here with you guys, and I feel very emotional right now about what you guys are trying to do and take down Scott Walker. Scott Walker took this economy from a, whatever it was, a $4 billion deficit to a $300 million surplus. And I say, big deal. Big deal. Europe is a dirty word now, right? We shouldn't be like Europe. Europe is a place where, people have jobs for life. People have health care. People have fat pensions. They have vacations. They wear Speedos. I like Speedos. Why can't we be more like Europe? Why is that a dirty word? What's wrong with what's going on in Europe? And they say to us, no, we should be nothing like them. And I say, we should be more like them. That's what we need to be. That should be our model. So I say, Europe, 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 Europe. I love you guys. I don't just talk the talk, my friends. To back up my newfound pro-Europe stance, I walk the walk. What do you think of Governor Walker's policies? You a fan of the governor?
I can't really call myself a fan so much. I have some questions about his policies, yep.
Okay.
Speaking of questionable policies.
Do you have a view on Governor Walker's economic policies?
It's crud.
It's what?
Crud.
You're not a fan?
Not a fan.
What do you think he's doing wrong?
I just know a lot of people are against him, so I just follow the herd, basically.
Oh, they've been disaster.
Yeah?
We've lost jobs every month since he took office. We're the national leader in job loss, and he was elected by promising jobs. We're negative.
That's not good.
Not good at all.
You don't seem even oddly struck that I'm wearing a Speedo.
Welcome to Madison.
I'm curious. What do you think of Governor Walker's economic policies? No, I'm not a pervert. I'm European.
Yes.
You uncomfortable a little bit?
Slightly. No, I'm comfortable with my manhood. I'm good.
This is ultimately not a provincial debate simply affecting Wisconsin, but is part of a much broader argument going on in state houses and mayor's offices around the country. Wisconsin has become a bellwether contest representing a debate not just about the fiscal health of Wisconsin, but about the fiscal health of states across the country and the nation itself. No doubt, there are countless mayors and governors who are looking at the cheese capital of America with bated breath. Everyone in Wisconsin can feel the eyes of the nation upon them. I do feel that this really is a fight that goes beyond Wisconsin, and this is really a model for fiscal reform across the country?
Well, I think so. Again, I think that's why you see all this out-of-state special interest money. Because, again, it's not just me, it's not just Wisconsin, it's not just other Republican governors and mayors. It's other discerning executives, including a number of Democrat governors and Democrat mayors across the country, who realize we got to do something. And I think for the special interest coming in from Washington, they recognize they need to send a message. They need to not only beat me, they need to take me out and send a message to anyone in America that if you cross these special interests, they're coming for you next. If we fail to win this election, if we fail to win this battle, this will set aside any sort of courageous act in American politics at least a decade, if not a generation.
If the recall effort succeeds, it will make people think twice. Conversely to that, if we lose, this has huge ramifications on the union movement for the future. But I think, again, one thing is done, though. One thing is done is it has galvanized unions and built coalitions that have never been built before.
Do you find this recall to essentially be a political hit on you?
Sure, there's no doubt about it. I mean, this is all about punishing me, taking me out to send a clear message to other elected officials, Republican and Democrat alike, that if you dare to take on the entrenched special interest, they'll come and get you.
I was just actually interviewed by a German affiliate of the news, the media.
Der Wienerschnitzel? No, it wasn't that one.
No. But it's amazing that everybody's watching, and I agree that we have to win. And if we don't win, there's national implications, and there could be a model set for other governors to do the same. But if we do win, I think it's going to give other governors a moment of pause.
If Walker's reforms are implemented throughout America, do the terrorists win?
The terrorist.
Just kidding. To truly understand why Governor Walker thinks that this fight is so important, you don't have to look across the ocean to Europe. You really only have to look around the country and see what entitlements have been costing states around America. It's so bad in Arizona that the state had to hawk its china by selling its state capitol building, legislative building, and Supreme Court building to private investors. California's raised so much debt to pay for its luxurious entitlement system that for every household of 4 residing in the state, California owes nearly $10,000. In the next budget, the amount devoted to debt repayment is expected to exceed the money invested in California's once prized public universities, which is now an also-ran system. But Wisconsin really doesn't have to look farther than across its border to neighboring Illinois to really see the consequences of out-of-control spending and entitlements. The state of Illinois has spent so much money that it's literally not able to pay its bills. Their social safety net is in tatters, and police squad cars have been turned away because gas station owners have refused to take their state credit cards. As a state controller of Illinois put it, Illinois has become a deadbeat state.
I think that what's happening in Wisconsin versus Illinois is a case study that I think that the economists and historians will study for years, because you have here in Wisconsin directly confronting the root causes of the problem, spending. In Illinois, they went the opposite direction and went with tax increases.
They now have an unemployment rate of 9.8%. They have the worst bond rating in the country. They have a pension system that's half funded. They're closing down more than a dozen state facilities, laying off thousands of public employees, and cutting more than $2 billion out of Medicaid. You don't need to look very far away, just to Springfield, down south of Wisconsin's border, to see how bad things could be if the people who are pushing the recall were successful here in Wisconsin.
Do you think that the fiscal day of reckoning has come for this country?
Oh, in many cases, it's come and passed. I mean, I keep harping on Illinois, but it's a great example for us. I mean, you've got a treasurer and comptroller down there who's actually told the bond rating agencies that if it was him, he wouldn't advise them to tell people to invest in the state of Illinois. For us, at the federal level, it's entitlement. At the state level, the parallel are legacy costs. And the legacy costs have exceeded the ability of the taxpayer to pay.
Do you feel like at times that you're the canary in the coal mine?
There's no doubt about it.
Well, you know the canary oftentimes dies.
Yeah. What I did here was realize I'm not holding my finger up trying to judge whatever the way the wind is temporarily. I'm trying to do what is right and what is just. I'm ultimately trying to do things that will make my kids and someday my grandkids proud that they had a father and a grandfather who was ultimately willing to do what was right more than just what was temporarily politically popular.
So I actually got a ticket on the way here. Could you fix this for me?
You're in the city of Madison. I think the last person you want to have change a ticket in Madison is Governor Walker.
Fair enough, fair enough.
TRS Files, True Tax Resolution Stories.
Hello, I'm Gary, and I'm not a paid actor. I went from owing $43,000 to the Internal Revenue Service to paying them $1,000.
If you owe the IRS over $20,000 or more in back taxes, have unfiled returns, or are under audit, call Tax Resolution Services now, 888-7804-TAX, or visit taxresolution.com/GBTV.
Bringing a firearm into your home is one of the most important decisions you can make. If you are considering gun ownership, CheaperThanDirt.com is here to help you make a responsible and informed choice. We understand it is a personal decision how you choose to protect your family. We offer thousands of choices of firearms, ammunition, and accessories to suit your individual needs. Be responsible, be proactive, and exercise your Second Amendment right. Find us online at CheaperThanDirt.com. That's CheaperThanDirt.com.
Freedom Connector puts the power back in your hands.
This is social organizing. It actually helps connect you with people in your own backyard.
It has no boundaries. We can link with any groups throughout the country.
We're just trying to lower barriers of connection, lower the costs of participating.
It's all about coalition building, teamwork, team building. It's a giant network.
It's in your hands. Log on to Freedom Connector today. Set up your profile, start connecting with other patriots, make your voice heard, and help take our country back.
I live alone, so when I slipped and fell in the kitchen last month and couldn't get to a phone, that's when I knew I needed Life Alert. With just one press of this button, I'm connected to the Life Alert Center, where I can get the help I need, even when I cannot reach a phone. With Life Alert, I'm never alone.
Call 1-800-996-6392 for your free Life Alert brochure. That's 1-800-996-6392. Call today.
So by tomorrow morning, Wisconsin will know who Governor Scott Walker's challenger will be in the June 5th election. The question is, what happens next? So, Ami, I noticed in your piece there were a lot of references to manhood, including visual. There was the reference to the saber in the pocket and cojones and so forth. And yet, so many of the labor supporters that you interviewed, they seemed really nice. So how has this fight gotten so passionate and so inflamed?
They actually were relatively nice. Although it's funny, when they didn't know who I was exactly, obviously. When they found out who I was, they found out because when the shot where I was walking down the street, we had a father and daughter who had this shocked look in their face. So we shot them, and afterwards he's like, "Who's this for?" I said, "Oh, it's for Glenn Beck." He freaked out. "No, you can't use that! God, no! God darn it!" He runs off and tells everybody I'm from Glenn Beck. They all charge out. All these really nice, sweet people charge out with their ukuleles, and they start shaking our car. And we just had to hightail out of there. But they're relatively, before that, they're relatively nice. Listen, this is a very, it really cuts to, I think, the core of where we are politically. I think there's an inflection point in our country. And the inflection point is, do we want to move in the direction of Europe? Or do you want to, what I mean by that is, a welfare state where if it feels good, you do it. You give people whatever you can because, if it feels good, it's got to be right. And that's kind of the European model where they defy economic gravity, essentially. And now we're seeing that they can't defy gravity, and they're crashing down. Or do you want to continue with this American ethos of independence and working hard and providing for your family yourself? And I think that it's this divide that we see which really animates people. And I think the left-right divide, obviously, is the point where we see this inflection point take place. The middle, the majority of America, I think, realize we're moving. We don't want to go in the European direction, but I think the ones who do are very vocal about it.
I think also, public opinion aside, the takeaway is what does and doesn't work. I mean, if you look at Wisconsin, the policies that he put forth, they're working. They're reducing the deficit. They're decreasing the unemployment numbers, although there's some question about that in 2012. I think that's due to some of the uncertainty with respect to what's going on right now and businesses not knowing what's going to happen in the future. But I think if we look on a local level, we see what works. And if we were to apply that to a national level, those same pro-growth policies, I think you would see the same effect. So that was one of the more simple takeaway things that I got. Isn't it scary that might not work? That meaning that he showed we now have the results in, and that apparently things have gone well, right. And yet you're still facing somebody who may get tossed out of office. Right, like public opinion is not reactive to policies working. It's just reactive to we don't want our stuff taken away.
Well, and proof of that is that this battle over recalling Scott Walker happened like 6 months into his term. I mean, he didn't have verifiable sort of policies in place for the people to say, this isn't working, you're not doing your job, throw the bums out. This was almost a gut reaction to what he had been saying the entire time on the campaign trail he was going to do. And he makes the point in Ami's piece that he didn't realize he was going to have to lay out the case yet again once he got elected.
And Ami, with Chris Christie, he took on public sector unions and is still pretty much applauded for it. And it looks like he's popular in New Jersey, which makes me think, is the key issue here that the change in the collective bargaining rights, is that the thing that really lit the fire? Do you think these public sector unions in Wisconsin, based on your conversation with people, maybe could have lived with
the short-term cuts or changes and said, well, you know, we'll get ours the next time around. We'll make sure that we organize for that. Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
Was that the tipping
You're
point?
absolutely exactly right. Listen, nobody the major change they proposed was putting aside collective bargaining for a second. It was that you had to pay 12.5% of your health care, which is not a lot of money when you think about it, if you really break it down. And you had to pay a small portion of your pension. What I heard from the union leaders was that they didn't like it, they pushed back hard, but they could have lived with it.
Temporary setback for them.
Temporary setback. But really, you hit the nail on the head. Collective bargaining, specifically the notion of freedom of choice, that you can opt out of paying dues to a union, which they viewed as really an existential threat. And they're right. Listen, to be honest, they're right. It really is an existential threat to public unions in Wisconsin because, listen, you may not, who knows what % of the union members will opt out of it. And if they do, they're in trouble. And they're not just they're in trouble, the Democratic Party is in trouble because that's their bread and butter. Big union is a significant contributor to the Democratic Party.
I think it's also worth pointing out that these battles are happening and did happen in other states. Just to remind viewers what happened around the same time that this started boiling over in Wisconsin. In Ohio, Governor Kasich attempted to take teachers' unions to task and propose new collective bargaining laws that were rejected 61 to 39% by Ohio voters. And of course, in Indiana, we all remember what happened when Democratic legislators walked out, left the state because they couldn't prevent Governor Daniels' right to work bill from passing. And they stayed out of state and held several bills hostage and finally returned months later. And I think in both of those cases, what's interesting to point out is that Mitch Daniels and Governor Kasich sort of capitulated, ended up saying, okay, it's not worth the fight. In fact, Mitch Daniels said, we're not quite in the same position or advocating quite the same things they are up in Madison. They sort of said, okay, to the people, we're not up for this fight. Walker seems to be, and I think, Buck, you're right, throwing Christie in there, one of the only governors who's really been, standing tall on this issue, willing to fall on the sword over this issue. And he highlights that in your piece, saying, I want to leave a legacy for my family, for my kids, for my grandkids, so they're proud of something their father did. I think that's rare.
But just to put this panic into context, that the outrage we're seeing in Wisconsin is over something that was much less than was actually proposed in Indiana and in Ohio. This is an effort to limit the collective bargaining rights of public employees, only collective bargaining rights of public employees. Let me just explain that simply.
Even less than that.
And even less than that.
Firefighters.
Exactly. Quickly, collective bargaining is a simple concept where it is a group of employees elect someone to represent them to go negotiate with their employer. And as a concept, it's governed by the National Labor Relations Act, which was something we brought into the New Deal during FDR. But it didn't apply to governments. It didn't apply to states. And in fact, Wisconsin was the first state government to enact collective bargaining for its employees.
And in fact, FDR was very opposed to public sector
FDR
unions.
was completely opposed to it applying to public employees. But Wisconsin was the first in 1959.
That's a lot of historical context.
Now, what Walker hopes to accomplish is simply to do two things, or the two most controversial is tell public employees, you're not going to collectively bargain. You're not going to force me to collectively bargain with you on issues outside of wages. Pensions, vacations, wages, I'll still do that with you. And the other thing which you point out, Ami, is I'm not going to mandatorily confiscate your union dues for you and give them to the union. You must voluntarily contribute that.
Right.
Yeah. Which threatens their very existence, as you said.
Indeed.
Indeed. Well, Ami, thank you for that piece, and thank you for the bravery of walking down the street. And you'll be with us after the break, but thank you for that bravery of walking down the street in a Speedo in Wisconsin and approaching complete strangers.
It was cold.
Amazing. So, are union interests putting your right to work in jeopardy? We'll talk about that after the break.
The TRS Files, True Tax Resolution Stories.
Hi, I'm Stuart B. I'm in the insurance industry, and I'm from Southern California. I faced a potential liability of $106,000. Tax resolution services settled for $9,200.
If you owe the IRS over $20,000 or more in back taxes, have unfiled returns, or are under audit, call Tax Resolution Services now, 888-7804-TAX, or visit taxresolution.com/GBTV.
Food independence, emergency preparedness, self-reliance. MyPatriotSupply.com. Get our survival seed vault and feed your family from your own garden for just $37.95. Our non-hybrid heirloom seeds are genuinely American, just like you. Your survival needs and survival seeds are at MyPatriotSupply.com. MyPatriotSupply.com. Self-reliance. MyPatriotSupply.com.
Freedom Connector puts the power back in your hands.
This is social organizing. It actually helps connect you with people in your own backyard.
It has no boundaries. We can link with any groups throughout the country.
We're just trying to lower barriers of connection, lower the costs of participating.
It's all about coalition buildings, teamwork, team building. It's a giant network.
It's in your hands. Log on to Freedom Connector today. Set up your profile, start connecting with other patriots, make your voice heard, and help take our country back.
Like you, I would do anything to protect my family. That's why I have food insurance, the emergency food supply that guarantees my family's most basic needs, safe and nutritious food. These high-quality freeze-dried meals last up to 25 years and are compact, affordable, and delicious. Start with a 2-week supply or plan for several months, whatever's right for you. Provide security for your family. Order food insurance today.
With states across the nation battling budget deficits and skyrocketing pension costs for public employees, Wisconsin is hardly unique. So how does this play out elsewhere in the country? Joining us to help us answer that question is the president of the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation, Mark Mix. Mark, thanks for joining us tonight.
It's great to be with you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Great. So we just watched a piece on the recall effort of Governor Scott Walker for what he had tried to do there in terms of limiting collective bargaining rights for public unions. What's happening across the country in terms of this broader effort?
Well, certainly Wisconsin is the battleground that everyone's paying attention to. But, you know, it's interesting. I heard the conversation before the break, and, you know, Pat Quinn, for example, in Illinois, announced that he's going to dramatically change the pension rules in Illinois, and no one seems to be bothered about that. Maybe it's because he has a D behind his name. But the idea that government unionism is being debated and being questioned is a reality that I think taxpayers across America have to face. I mean, Andrew Cuomo in New York is dealing with it. Governor Brown in California, Chris Christie in New Jersey, Governor Quinn in Illinois, Governor Kasich in Ohio, and certainly Governor Walker in Wisconsin.
Well, something that strikes me about the politics of public unions and collective bargaining is it seems like over time, the left and the right have sort of switched places. For example, George Meany, the former president of AFL-CIO, he said that it was impossible to bargain collectively with government. He was against it. We mentioned FDR. He didn't support public unions having collective bargaining rights. And who did support collective bargaining rights was no other than Ronald Reagan when he was governor of California and extending them to state and local government. So what's happening here politically with this entire issue?
Well, it is an issue that, as you correctly mentioned, you know, Roosevelt back in '37 says that to think that you could bargain with government is unthinkable and intolerable. George Meany, the AFL-CIO president in '55, says you can't bargain with government. The Executive Council of the AFL-CIO says we're not interested in bargaining with government. In fact, the only redress that public employees have is equal to the taxpayer. The fact is that as the economy improved, the growth in government and the growth in union power has transferred from the private sector to the public sector. So this is now the final frontier for organized labor. And I think Republican legislators, and believe me, Amy, there are a lot of Republicans that are really bad on this issue, as you already mentioned, that say, oh, bargaining is just fine. Well, the fact that you apply the private sector labor relations model to the public sector is completely unacceptable, and we're learning that lesson right now. And this battle in Wisconsin is really the seminal battle in how it's all going to turn out.
Mark, it's Essie. I agree with you. This is a seminal battle, and I'm going to predict that Scott Walker is going to win this recall. And correct me if I'm wrong, but here's how I see this in terms of the general election and the general state of the country right now. If Scott Walker is recalled, then since Obama has been elected, we will have in Wisconsin ejected Russ Feingold, elected a Republican governor, and re-elected him I think that puts Wisconsin in play for November to potentially vote for a Republican president for the first time in 7 election cycles. Do you think that the consequences are that big?
I think they are, Essie, and I think you're spot on in your analysis. I mean, this is, as Richard Trumka would say, he doesn't say it's a test run. He says it's basically a really, really important battle for this. And, you know, he's trying to lower the level of expectations now. He said something the other day on C-SPAN, I believe it was yesterday, where, you know, if we don't win, Governor Walker will be so debilitated that he won't be effective and he'll be knocked out in 2 years. Now, I don't know what the outcome's going to be. I think, as you know, Essie, the numbers are very close. I think the polls show 46-46 or 48-48. Depending on what you're reading, and it's going to be a battle of turnout. Organized labor is in what I would consider to be a survival battle for them. Now, and that changes everything. When you're in a survival battle legislatively, you have to throw everything you've got at it. The other side needs to motivate their people on the offense, which is a little bit harder to do. But I think in Wisconsin, as you correctly identified, we're going to see a really big change in that state, and that puts the whole electoral map in play for sure.
Hi, Mark. Jedediah here. I have a quick question for you. If these union challenges to the union are successful, can you just tell us in a very basic way what that means for a local economy, what that means for someone's day-to-day, how it affects their lives on a day-to-day basis?
Well, Jedediah, you asked if the unions are successful. Is that correct?
No, if the challenge to the unions is successful and their power is diminished, what does that mean for a local economy?
I think what it means is we get control of government back. You know, frankly, the idea that a private organization has rights above ordinary citizens to redress their government, meaning, you know, union officials, as Buck, I think, mentioned here, the bargaining model is that, you know, a group of employees elect a representative. Well, in the case of monopoly bargaining, it may be less than a majority in many cases, and they may not represent workers that don't want it to be represented by them in the first place. But the idea is, I think we're finally going to get control of government again, and I think the evidence from Wisconsin is instructive. A $3.6 billion deficit to a $300,000 surplus, control over local school districts where they are not laying teachers off, they're actually hiring them back. School boards are able to negotiate health care contracts that are, what, 40% less than what the union monopoly bargaining contract said they had to negotiate over. These are winning issues for taxpayers, and I think the real story here, the anecdotal information about the success of Walker's reforms is really what hopefully the taxpayers in Wisconsin and the citizens across the country are seeing, and I think we'll see more of it. And it's going to happen. The reality of it, the fact is, win or lose in Wisconsin, this battle is coming to state after state across America because the fiscal crisis is not ending at the state and local level, and you're going to have to address these issues.
I wonder, has Walker made the case? He certainly has used numbers effectively, and he's talked about other cases. You know, he obviously can point to Illinois. California would be an excellent model, looking at cities like Vallejo, where they basically said, well, we have to pay our retired police force, so we can't really have a police force now. I mean, those case studies, I think, are very illustrative of what's going on. But I don't feel like he's made the case about the sort of egregious contracts themselves, what the public sector unions are actually getting, what's sort of larded into those agreements in Wisconsin. Now, maybe that's strategic. Maybe it's because he doesn't want to be seen as demonizing anybody. He doesn't want to sort of be going too far. But I do, to lower the temperature, because it was pretty high. It was pretty high. But I do think that it would be, especially as you're talking about at the national level, people should know that when you're talking about public sector unions, there's the pay scale, there's pensions, but there are things way beyond that you would never see in the private sector and add to expenses tremendously, and as importantly, really slow down things, actually make them much less productive. You know,
I would offer one other thing that I hope that people can really understand. That's an impressive point that Mark just made, and that is the idea that a private sector labor relations concept can work in the public sector is fundamentally flawed for a very simple reason. There is a check on private sector relationships between unions and businesses, and that check is, I cannot put the business out of business. I cannot run this under the ground. But there is no check on a public sector employee union on their employer, the government, outside of, well, will the taxpayer ever cut me off?
A public sector friend of mine once referred to this as the ultimate self-licking ice cream cone, and I think that's pretty accurate.
They're on both sides of the negotiating table, but I do wonder, I was reading Professor Joseph McCartan of Georgetown saying that public sector unions, he put it, have been the bulwark of some sectors of middle-class life in America, and if some people aren't seeing this as really an attack on that as well, Essie, what are your thoughts?
Well, that's been a very successful attempt on the part of the left to paint that picture, so that it's not just the power of unions, it's not just entitlements. It's painting this connection between small town America, manufacturing, blue collar America, you know, your family.
Right.
That's been a very successful push. But as Buck points out, there's some real scary stuff that happens that doesn't get talked about a lot, that I think most people aren't as aware of when you talk about collective bargaining and labor issues. It's really become a story of sort of glossy politics.
In the end, that's how
and
this
not
boiled down.
economics, which is what it should be.
And it was in Ami's documentary, and I would love to see. I don't know how Republicans combat the idea that that limiting the rights of public employee unions is an attack on firefighters and teachers and the middle class.
Great point.
You know what's really interesting is that they did a poll on the the election, and among Democrats, not Republicans, but among Democrats, they asked them what are the major issues in this recall election, and the idea of collective bargaining and the rights of public workers was way down there. Far and away among Democrats, the #1 issue was jobs. Secondary, a far second, was the issue with this whole notion of collective bargaining and public sector union workers. So it's a very interesting dynamic going on. We hear all this bluster about this, but the reality is, Democrats, they're not looking at this as a major thing.
Yeah, so Mark, let me ask you about that. With the politics behind public unions and collective bargaining, Ami was telling us during one of the breaks that a gentleman that he interviewed, the head of the firefighters union in Wisconsin, seemed conservative on absolutely almost everything else. They went out and had beers and chatted. It was on unions where you see this other side of the political debate. What are your thoughts?
Well, that's exactly right. And when you really cut to the chase in Wisconsin, Ami got to it earlier. He said that this is really about unions' privilege to collect forced dues from workers and then turn around, use that money for politics to elect politicians who are sitting on the other side of the table to negotiate these contracts. I mean, if this were about retirement contributions and health care contributions, the union officials, although they said they conceded after Walker proceeded with the bill, I believe, if I remember correct. But the issue is about union power. It's not about workers, and Walker's done the right thing here by keeping the public employees out of it. Union officials want to wrap themselves in the public employees, the teachers, the firefighters, the police officers, for purposes of protecting their own privilege to force workers to pay dues to get or keep a job in Wisconsin in the public sector. The payroll deduction issue is a huge issue for organized labor. If they have to collect their dues from workers by going door to door and saying, hey, you owe us $50 this month, public employees, regular workers in the private sector are going to say, what did you do for me? And the WEAC, in their federal lawsuit, in their affidavit, in their brief, they said that if Act 10 is enforced and they can't use the payroll deduction, they're going to go out of business. Their business model relies on the state collecting their dues and forwarding it to them instead of them collecting it from the members they claim to represent.
All right. Thanks a lot, Mark. We appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you, Ami. Really quick prediction. Recall effort. Scott Walker, will he survive? What are your thoughts?
Yes.
Yes, there you go. Well, keep your eyes on the battleground of Wisconsin. We sure will. Thanks for joining us tonight.